Hello and welcome to Newsweek South Asia, your one-stop destination for in-depth analysis of security challenges, regional conflicts, and the evolving threat of terrorism. Let's take a look at the headlines first. India slams proxy terror and nuclear blackmail at UN, targets Pakistan's hypocrisy. Quad condemns Pahalgam terror attack, backs India's right to defend against terrorism. And Pakistan exposed at UNHRC as Pashtun activist alleges war crimes and ethnic cleansing. India is calling time on terror enablers and doing it on every global platform that matters. In a powerful address at the United Nations headquarters in New York, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar urged the world to unite against terrorism, warning against treating terror groups as proxies and submitting to nuclear blackmail. His remarks came just a day before Pakistan assumed the rotating presidency of the UN Security Council. But this wasn't India's only diplomatic strike. At the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Defense Ministers meeting held last week, India once again confronted Pakistan, this time for attempting to erase terrorism from the agenda altogether. We have a report.
At the UN headquarters in New York, India unveiled a powerful exhibition titled The Human Cost of Terrorism, a sobering tribute to victims of deadly attacks carried out across the world. The exhibition features chilling documentation of deadly attacks from the 1993 Mumbai blasts and 26/11 to the recent April 22 Pahalgam massacre that left 26 civilians dead. Each of these attacks has a common thread: the involvement of Pakistan-based terror outfits. Addressing UN diplomats, Jaishankar said, "The time has come for the world to unite around some non-negotiable principles. No impunity for terrorists, no treating them as proxies, and no yielding to nuclear blackmail."
5 weeks ago, the United Nations Security Council issued a strong condemnation of a particularly horrific act of terrorism in Pahalgam. It demanded that its perpetrators be held accountable and brought to justice. We have since seen that happen. What that response underlines is the larger significance of the message of zero tolerance for terrorism. The world must come together on some basic concepts: no impunity to terrorists, no treating them as proxies, and no yielding to nuclear blackmail. Any state sponsorship must be exposed and must be countered.
A strong message indeed, especially as Pakistan prepares to take over the monthly presidency of the UN Security Council, a move that many see as deeply ironic given its long and well-documented history of exporting terrorism. While Islamabad denies involvement, the evidence speaks louder than its denials. Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and other Pakistan-based groups have been repeatedly linked to terror attacks inside India, with safe havens, training camps, and ideological backing often provided by the Pakistani deep state.
The world must come together on some basic concepts.
And yet, as Jaishankar pointed out, the world continues to allow such regimes to escape scrutiny, cloaking their terror under diplomatic immunity or nuclear fear-mongering.
Terrorism is one of the gravest threats to humanity. It is the antithesis of everything that the UN stands for: human rights, rules and norms, and how nations should conduct their dealings with each other. When terrorism is supported by a state against a neighbor, when it is fueled by the bigotry of extremism, when it drives a whole host of illegal activities, it is imperative to call it out publicly. And one way of doing so is to display the havoc that it has wreaked on global society.
The UN exhibition on display from June 30 to July 11 is a powerful visual documentation of the devastation left behind by terrorism. But more importantly, it serves as a moral and political reckoning. Each photograph, each statistic, each victim's story is a reminder of what happens when the world looks away and when terror is allowed to flourish under the guise of strategic depth or freedom fighters. Jaishankar's remarks at the UN echo what Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh underscored recently at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO Defence Ministers' meeting in China. Last week, India refused to endorse the SCO joint statement, which chose to ignore the April 22nd Pahalgam massacre while selectively highlighting the Jafar Express hijacking in Pakistan's Balochistan. The bias was unmistakable. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh stood firm and walked away from the document, leaving the SCO without a joint declaration for the year. India's firm stance was a direct rejection of Pakistan's habitual terror denial and a clear signal to China that using multilateral platforms to protect terror sponsors will not go unchallenged.
Its objective was to fight terrorism. Okay? So this organization exists to fight terrorism. So what happened was, when Rajnath ji went for a defense ministers meeting and there was a discussion on the outcome document, one country, you can guess which one country said that no, we do not want a reference to that. Now Rajnath ji's view rightly was that without that reference, when the main purpose of that organization is to fight terrorism and you are not allowing a reference to that, I am not prepared to accept it.
China, this year's SCO chair, allowed the deliberate omission of the Pahalgam attack reference, even as Beijing included Pakistan's domestic security concerns. Analysts point out that China has consistently used its influence in multilateral forums to shield Pakistan, whether at the UN Security Council or inside the SCO. For India, the message was clear: no compromise on terrorism, no compromise on justice. Whether at the United Nations or in multilateral platforms like SCO, India is pushing back against the appeasement of terror exporting states and demanding accountability.
Pakistan's war on terror has always had two faces, one for the world and another for its own people. While Islamabad brands itself as a frontline state in counter-terrorism, the truth on the ground tells a far darker story. Recently, at the 59th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, Pashtun rights activist Fazal-ur-Rehman Afridi launched a scathing attack on the Pakistani military establishment, accusing it of war crimes, ethnic persecution, and enabling terrorism in the country's northwest. Afridi's remarks have reignited international scrutiny of Pakistan's long-running campaign of violence in Pashtun-majority regions, a campaign that has left thousands dead, displaced millions, and silenced any voice of dissent.
While global attention remains fixated on regional security and cross-border terrorism, a silent war is unfolding inside Pakistan, where the state has turned its weapon inward, targeting its own Pashtun population under the guise of counter-terrorism. The issue was brought to the global stage by Pashtun right activist Fazal-ur-Rehman Afridi, who demanded justice for the millions suffering under what he called a state-run campaign of ethnic persecution. Speaking on the sidelines of the 59th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, PTM activist Fazal-ur-Rehman Afridi accused the Pakistan Army of carrying out systematic human rights abuses against ethnic Pashtuns under the guise of counter-terrorism. He spoke of extrajudicial killing, torture, enforced disappearances, and what he called a campaign of ethnic cleansing carried out with drones, shells, and boots on the ground.
We are presenting especially the case of Pashtuns in the context of the drone attacks which are continuously attacking the Pashtun populations in form of Fata and even now in the settled areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. More than 40 drone attacks up till now have taken place, and in these drone attacks, unfortunately, most of the victims are the children, women and elderly. So we request the international community to take notice of these atrocities by the Pakistan army on the innocent Pashtun people. On the other side, the other human rights violations like enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, torture and arbitrary detention also continues. Even the mortar shellings yesterday, more than 5 people were killed by the Pakistani army.
Afridi's warnings come as no surprise to the people living in Pakistan's northwest, where decades of military operation have turned thriving communities into ghost towns. Drone strikes and artillery shelling in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and former FTA region have killed hundreds, often under the pretext of eliminating terrorism, but with civilians as the primary casualties. Recently in Mir Ali, North Waziristan, 4 children from a single family were killed in a drone strike, an attack local blame on Pakistan Army, while ISPR quickly denied involvement. Afridi highlighted a deepening hypocrisy in Islamabad's policy, where peaceful right defenders are jailed, while terrorist groups are allowed to re-emerge. He condemned Pakistan's secret negotiation with Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and revealed shocking details of state-sponsored resettlement plan that allegedly moved Taliban families into Pashtun territories without local consent or oversight.
Even today, one forcibly disappeared person who was disappeared by the state of Pakistan 5 years ago, his body was recovered and he was extrajudicially killed by the state of Pakistan in jail. So we want to raise these issues. And on the other hand, the PTM has been banned by the state of Pakistan. The only organization which is defending the human rights of the Pashtun people is banned by the state of Pakistan. On one hand, the state of Pakistan is banning the human rights defenders, banning organizations which are raising their voice for human rights, but on the other hand, they are negotiating with the terrorist organizations. They are bringing back they have brought back the TTP to the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and now they together the TTP and the Pakistani military are creating a security situation in the region.
Despite its public posture as a victim of terror, Pakistan has long been accused of cultivating and controlling militant proxies to serve its regional interests. This group, including the TTP, Lashkar-e-Taiba and others, have been alternatively suppressed or resettled by state, depending on political and military convenience. Pashtuns have paid the price, with more than 6 million internally displaced, thousands missing, and entire generations growing up under military occupation. Right organizations have long warned that Pakistan military action in Pashtun region amount to crime against humanity, but global powers have remained silent, prioritizing strategic alliances over human rights. Afridi called this silence a stain on international conscience and demanded that the United Nations launch an independent probe into Pakistan's atrocities.
Afghan women continue to live under one of the most repressive regimes in the modern world, denied education, stripped of employment, and erased from public life. As the Taliban tighten their grip, the international community is once again grappling on how to engage with Afghanistan's de facto rulers. At a recent United Nations Security Council meeting, the UN introduced a new Mosaic plan, a multilateral framework for structured engagement with the Taliban, without granting them formal recognition. While some countries supported the initiative as a path toward pragmatic dialogue, others warned it risks legitimizing a regime that has institutionalized the oppression of women.
3 years since the Taliban's return to power, Afghanistan has become a prison for its women. Girls are banned from secondary and higher education, women have been pushed out of the workforce, and public life is governed by a morality policing law enforced under the so-called Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. According to UN Women, no restrictions have been lifted in over 9 months, a damning indicator of the regime's rigid gender appetite. Yet, international diplomacy continues. In this context, the UN unveiled the Mosaic Plan, a strategy to address key concerns including counter-terrorism, humanitarian relief, and human rights without legitimizing Taliban rule.
We have suffered 4 decades of
Rosa Otunbayeva, head of the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, presented the plan at the Security Council, acknowledging that despite engagement efforts, the conditions for Afghan women remain unacceptable.
The international community remains extremely concerned that engagement has not improved the unacceptable situation of Afghan women and girls, promoted inclusive governance, or prevented a marked deterioration in human rights. The de facto authorities also conveyed their grievances: frozen assets, sanctions, non-recognition, the need for development assistance, and an end to aid dependency. Through the comprehensive approach, the UN seeks to put these issues into a more structured, multilateral framework for dialogue and potential progress. The law cemented the de facto authorities' systematic state-sponsored policies that exclude women and girls from participation in public life, including access to education, employment, freedom of movement, and freedom of expression. Through this law, de facto authorities are continuing to pursue a path that distances Afghanistan from its international obligations and hinders Afghanistan's eventual reintegration into the international system.
The repression goes far beyond education. Women-run businesses are being shut down. Humanitarian operations have been obstructed, and the Afghan media, especially women journalists, has been stifled into silence. The 2024 Afghanistan Gender Index, developed by UN Women with support from the European Union, reports that nearly 80% of young Afghan women are neither in education, employment, nor training. Not a single woman holds a position in the Taliban's de facto cabinet or local governance. A patchwork of more than 80 edicts and decrees issued by the Taliban has systematically dismantled women's rights, banning them from most professions, from parks, gyms and sports clubs, and from education beyond grade 6. UN officials have declared this a gender appetite, not just repression, but a calculated erasure of women from society. Even UN agencies have not been spared. In May, dozens of female UN staff members received explicit death threats from armed actors in Kabul.
The threat remains present, however.
The perpetrators operated with coordination and impunity, raising serious questions about the Taliban's claims of providing security.
In this May, dozens of our female national staff were subjected to explicit death threats from unidentified individuals in relation to their work with UNAMA and other UN agencies, funds, programs, requiring us to implement interim measures to protect their safety. In our subsequent engagements with the de facto authorities, they said they were not responsible but it was also clear these armed individuals were operating with impunity in a coordinated manner in the capital. This is a strong rebuke to the de facto authorities' claim that they have established security and secured the safety and dignity of Afghan women.
Meanwhile, Afghanistan's humanitarian crisis is deepening. Mine clearance operations are collapsing due to funding shortages. Children continue to die from unexploded ordnance. Food aid, healthcare, and shelter are at risk, all as international donor support fades. More than 600,000 Afghans have returned from Pakistan and Iran this year, fleeing economic hardship and regional instability. With only 19% of the humanitarian response plan funded, communities inside Afghanistan are buckling under the pressure.
Mines and the unexploded ordnance have killed hundreds of people this year, most of them children, and if the current funding cuts continue, countless more lives will be at risk. The grim picture of demining work in Afghanistan reflects broader cuts in life-saving humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan. Almost midway through the year, and the Afghanistan humanitarian needs and response plan is just 19% funded. This shortfall, which has been compounded by recent dramatic cuts in donor funding, jeopardizes the humanitarian response at a time when the region is experiencing considerable volatility.
The Taliban's insistence on global recognition without reform has been met with mixed responses. China and Russia backed easing travel restrictions for Taliban officials. The United States held firm that its policy remains under review, focused on counter-terrorism and the safety of American citizens. But while diplomatic games continue, Afghan women continue to pay the price.
In a powerful display of unity and resolve, the world's leading Indo-Pacific democracies have sent a resounding message. Terrorism will not be tolerated. At the 10th Quad Foreign Ministers meeting in Washington, D.C., India, the United States, Japan, and Australia jointly condemned the recent terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam and reiterated their unwavering support for a free, open, and secure Indo-Pacific. The meeting came amid heightened tensions in the region, following India's strong counter-terrorism response under Operation Sindoor. A report.
The Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or the Quad, brings together 4 leading democracies with a shared commitment to peace, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. At the 10th Foreign Ministers' meeting in Washington, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, joined counterparts from the US, Japan, and Australia to review regional challenges and advance cooperation on maritime security, infrastructure, critical minerals, and climate resilience. This was also the first Quad Foreign Ministers' meeting following Operation Sindoor, India's response to the April 22 terrorist attack in Pahalgam. In a strongly worded joint statement, the Quad nations condemned the assault in the strongest terms, calling for the perpetrators, organizers, and financiers of the attack to be brought to justice without delay. At the Quad meet, Dr. S. Jaishankar made India's position clear. New Delhi, he said, will not tolerate terrorism and reserves every right to defend its citizens from cross-border attacks. He called for an unambiguous global stance, one that does not equate victims with perpetrators.
A word about terrorism in the light of our recent experience. The world must display zero tolerance. Victims and perpetrators must never be equated, and India has every right to defend its people against terrorism, and we will exercise that right. We expect our Quad partners to understand and appreciate that.
This statement was not just well received, it was amplified. The Quad Joint Declaration underscored opposition to all forms of terrorism and violent extremism, including cross-border terrorism, and urged all United Nations member states to fulfill their obligations under international law and cooperate in investigating the Pahalgam attack. For New Delhi, the diplomatic messaging couldn't be clearer. Former Minister of State M.J. Akbar says, the Quad's language directly implicates Pakistan's state machinery, the military, the ISI, as architects of the Pahalgam carnage.
The Quad statement is extremely important, not only for the general condemnation of Pahalgam, but the specific words that have been used. Perpetrators, financiers, organizers, every member of Quad knows precisely who they mean. They mean the Pakistan Army, they mean the ISI, right? And I think such a specific condemnation of Pakistan's barbaric attacks in Pahalgam has rarely been made. Certainly, I think this is the first for Quad. And I think this is also evidence. You must remember this is taking place in Washington. This is taking place at the moment under the aegis of the State Department of America.
The message is unmistakable. The world's leading democracies are no longer willing to compartmentalize terrorism when it originates from state actors. The Quad's unified voice reflects a strategic convergence, one that elevates India's regional role as not just a victim of terrorism, but a responder and deterrent. That convergence will take center stage later this year when India hosts the next Quad Leaders Summit.
That's all we have for you on this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with deeper insights and sharp analysis on the stories shaping the region. Until then, do write to us at nwsa@nin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra signing off on behalf of the entire team. Stay informed, stay safe.